The day after I transferred my business to my daughter, the bank flagged a routine review. The manager asked one question that made my hands shake. Why does your signature appear on documents you've never seen? I sat across from Linda Parrish, the branch manager I'd known for 15 years. She wore the same pearl earrings she always did, same careful smile, but her hands were folded on top of a manila folder and she wasn't opening it. I'm sorry, I said. Can you repeat that? Your signature, Linda said slowly, on 3 separate wire transfer authorizations, from last Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Do you remember initiating these transactions? Last Tuesday, I'd been at my granddaughter's soccer game. Wednesday, I drove to the coast with my wife. Thursday, we had lunch at that Italian place she likes. No, I said. Linda opened the folder. She turned it around and slid it across the desk. 3 documents. Each one had my signature at the bottom. Same slant, same pressure, same loop on the capital J in my last name. These total $1.4 million, Linda said. Transferred to an account registered under TRG Holdings LLC. Do you know that entity? I picked up the first document. My hands were steady, but something behind my ribs felt like it was cracking. The signature was perfect, but I'd never seen this paper before in my life. No, I said again. Mr. Hayward, I need to ask you directly. Did you authorize anyone to sign on your behalf? The answer was yes, but I hadn't authorized this. 2 months ago, I'd transferred operational control of Hayward Equipment Services to my daughter, Melissa. She'd been working in the business for 8 years, knew the clients, knew the contracts. I'd built the company from nothing, spent 34 years turning it into something that mattered, and I'd done it so she could have something solid under her feet. The lawyer had explained the delegation clause. It was standard, he said. It allowed her to execute contracts and manage accounts without needing my signature every time. Efficiency, continuity, smart business. I'd signed it the same day I signed the transfer papers. My daughter has signing authority, I said. Linda's expression didn't change, but I saw her shoulders drop a fraction. Relief, maybe, or disappointment. I see, she said. And you're aware that she's been exercising that authority? For business operations, yes. Mr. Hayward, these transfers went to a holding company that was incorporated 4 days before your daughter assumed control. The registered agent is a law firm in Delaware. We can't see the ownership structure without a subpoena. I set the document down. My throat was dry. What are you saying? I'm saying, Linda said carefully, that someone with access to your accounts has been moving significant assets into an entity you don't recognize, and I'm required to report that. Report it to who? The fraud department, possibly the authorities, depending on what we find. I looked at the signature again. It was mine, or close enough that even I couldn't tell the difference. Give me a day, I said. Linda hesitated. Mr. Hayward, if this is fraud, it's not fraud. It's a miscommunication. I'll handle it. She didn't look convinced, but she closed the folder. 24 hours, she said. After that, I have to escalate this. I stood up. My knees felt loose, like the joints had been replaced with something that didn't fit right. I shook her hand and walked out of the bank into the parking lot. The sun was too bright. Everything was too bright. I sat in my truck and pulled out my phone. I called Melissa. It rang 4 times before she picked up. Hey, Dad, what's up? Her voice was cheerful, light, the same voice she'd used when she was 16 and trying to borrow the car. I just left the bank, I said. Linda Parrish wants to talk to you. There was a pause, not long, maybe 2 seconds, but I heard it. About what? Wire transfers, TRG Holdings. Does that name mean anything to you? Another pause. Dad, can we talk about this later? I'm in the middle of something. No, I said. We can talk about it now. I heard her breathe out, slow and controlled. It's a restructuring vehicle, she said. For tax purposes. Blake set it up. It's completely legal. Blake, her husband, the guy who'd worked in private equity before he decided that managing my business was a better use of his time. You moved $1.4 million without telling me, I said. I didn't need to tell you. That's what the delegation agreement is for. That agreement was for operational expenses, not for transferring assets into a company I've never heard of. Dad, this is standard financial planning. If you want to keep the business viable, you have to think about tax efficiency. Blake knows what he's doing. I gripped the steering wheel with my free hand. You forged my signature. I didn't forge anything. I have signing authority. That's not forgery. That's delegation. The way she said it, calm and precise, like she'd rehearsed it, like she'd known this conversation was coming. Melissa, I need you to reverse those transfers. I can't do that. Yes, you can. No, Dad, I can't. The holding company has already reallocated those funds. They're part of a larger structure now. If we reverse them, it triggers penalties, tax complications. You don't want that. I closed my eyes. Did you think I wouldn't notice? I thought you'd trust me, she said. Her voice changed. Softer now, hurt, almost. I thought you'd understand that I'm trying to protect what you built. By hiding it from me? By managing it properly. You signed the transfer, Dad. You gave me control. That means you have to let me do my job. This isn't your job. This is theft. The line went quiet. When she spoke again, the softness was gone. I'm going to pretend you didn't say that. You're upset. I get it. Change is hard. But you need to take a step back and let me run this company the way it needs to be run. We'll talk later, okay? I have a meeting. She hung up. I sat there with the phone in my hand, staring at the dashboard. My truck was parked under a tree, and the branches threw shadows across the windshield. They moved in the wind, slow and hypnotic, and I watched them because I didn't know what else to do. I'd built that business with my hands. Literally. The first piece of equipment I ever serviced was a broken hydraulic lift in a garage that didn't have heat. I was 24. I worked 16-hour days for 3 years before I could afford to hire anyone. I bought the first truck used. I slept in it sometimes when jobs ran late. I missed birthdays, missed anniversaries, missed my son's high school graduation because a client needed an emergency repair and I couldn't afford to lose the contract. I did all of that so my kids wouldn't have to, and now my daughter was telling me I didn't understand how business worked. I started the engine and drove home. My wife, Anne, was in the kitchen when I walked in. She was cutting vegetables for dinner, something with zucchini and tomatoes, and she looked up when she heard the door. "How'd it go at the bank?" she asked. I set my keys on the counter and sat down at the table. "Not great." She put the knife down and turned around. "What happened?" I told her. All of it. The wire transfers, the holding company, the conversation with Melissa. Anne listened without interrupting, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Did you look at the transfer documents?" she asked finally. "The ones from the bank?" "Yes." "No. The ones you signed 2 months ago, the delegation agreement." I hadn't. Not carefully. The lawyer had walked me through them, and I'd trusted him. I'd trusted all of them. "I'll get them," I said. I went into my office and pulled the file from the cabinet. It was thick, full of paperwork I'd barely glanced at after signing. I brought it back to the kitchen and spread it out on the table. Anne picked up the delegation agreement and started reading. "Here," she said after a minute. She pointed to a paragraph halfway down the second page. "This clause gives her authority to execute any financial transaction necessary for the operation, preservation, or restructuring of the business. It doesn't specify a cap. It doesn't require notification. It just says, necessary." I read it. Then I read it again. "That's broad," I said. "That's intentional," Anne said. She flipped to the next page. "And this section here? It indemnifies her from any liability as long as she's acting in what she determines to be the best interest of the company. Not what you determine, what she determines. I felt something cold settle in my chest. She planned this, I said. She planned something, Anne said. I don't know if it's this, but she didn't write this agreement herself. Blake probably did, or their lawyer. Either way, they were very careful. I looked at my wife. She'd been quiet during the transfer process, hadn't raised any objections when I'd announced it at dinner, but now I saw the way she was looking at the documents, the way her jaw was set. You knew, I said. I suspected. Why didn't you say anything? Would you have listened? I didn't answer. Anne sat down across from me. She folded her hands on the table, the same way Linda Parrish had. Melissa has been different for the last year, she said. Ever since Blake started getting more involved in the business. She stopped asking your opinion on things, stopped updating you. She'd come to dinner and talk about the company like it was already hers, like you were just a consultant she had to humor. I thought she was growing into the role. Maybe she was, but Blake was growing into something else. What do you mean? Anne's eyes were steady. He looks at you like you're furniture. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, replaying the phone call with Melissa over and over. The way she'd dismissed me. The way she'd made it sound like I was the problem. At 2 a.m, I got up and went back to my office. I pulled out every piece of paperwork from the transfer. The operating agreement, the corporate bylaws, the asset schedule. I read them all, word by word. Anne was right. The delegation agreement was airtight. Melissa could do almost anything she wanted, and as long as she claimed it was in the company's best interest, I had no recourse. But there was something else. Buried in the asset schedule was a list of properties and equipment titled under Hayward Equipment Services. The main warehouse, 3 service trucks, 2 forklifts, a hydraulic press, office furniture. But there was a note at the bottom, small and easy to miss. Additional assets to be identified and transferred upon final audit. I pulled out my phone and checked the company account online. I still had read-only access. The balance was lower than it should have been, but not empty. There were transactions I didn't recognize, payments to vendors I'd never heard of, consulting fees to a firm called Apex Strategic Partners. I Googled them. No website, no address, just a registered agent in Delaware, same as TRG Holdings. I sat back in my chair and felt the anger start to build, not the hot, explosive kind, the slow kind, the kind that burns cold and doesn't go away. Melissa wasn't restructuring the business, she was gutting it. The next morning, I called Linda Parrish. I need copies of those wire transfer documents, I said. Mr. Hayward, I really think you should. I know what you think. I need the copies. She sighed. I can have them ready this afternoon. I'll be there at 2. I hung up and called my lawyer, not the one who'd handled the transfer, a different one. Guy named Paul Brennan, who I'd worked with years ago on a contract dispute. Jack, he said when he answered. Long time. What's going on? I told him everything. He listened, asked a few questions, and then went quiet. You signed the delegation agreement, he said finally. Yes. And you didn't put any restrictions on her authority. The lawyer said it was standard. It is standard, Paul said, for someone you trust. I trusted her. I know. That's the problem. I rubbed my forehead. Can I reverse it? The transfer? No. Not unless you can prove fraud or undue influence, and from what you're telling me, she didn't technically do anything illegal. Unethical, maybe, but not illegal. So I'm stuck. Not necessarily. You still own equity in the company, right? She has operational control, but you retained ownership? I pulled the transfer documents toward me and scanned the equity section. 60%, I said. She has 40. Then you're not powerless. You can't override her day-to-day decisions. But you can call a shareholder meeting. You can vote to remove her as CEO. You can dissolve the delegation agreement if you can get a majority vote. I am the majority. Exactly. I felt something loosen in my chest. How do I do that? I'll draft a notice. You'll need to give her 10 days warning per the bylaws. Then you show up, you vote, and you take back control. She's not going to let that happen. She doesn't have to let it happen. That's the point of bylaws. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat there for a long time, staring at the papers on my desk. 10 days. I could do a lot in 10 days. At 2 o'clock, I walked into the bank and picked up the wire transfer documents. Linda handed them over in a sealed envelope, her expression carefully neutral. "Did you talk to your daughter?" she asked. "I did. And?" "It's being handled." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't press. I drove home and spread the documents out on the kitchen table. Anne came in and stood behind me, reading over my shoulder. "These signatures," she said, "they're too perfect." "What do you mean?" "Look at the way the J curves. It's identical on all three. When you sign something, there's always a little variation. Pressure, angle, speed, but these are exact." I looked closer. She was right. "A stamp," I said, "or a digital copy. Either way, she didn't even bother to forge them by hand." I leaned back in my chair. "That's arrogance." "That's confidence," Anne said. "She thinks you won't fight back." I looked up at her. She's wrong. The next day, I drove to the warehouse. It was mid-morning, and the lot was busy. 3 trucks were parked by the loading dock, and I could see 2 guys unloading equipment. I recognized one of them. Danny Ruiz. He'd worked for me for 12 years. I parked near the office and walked inside. The receptionist, a young woman I didn't recognize, looked up and smiled. "Can I help you?" "I'm Jack Hayward. I'm here to see Melissa." Her smile faltered. "Do you have an appointment?" "I don't need an appointment. I own this company." She picked up the phone and pressed a button. "There's a Jack Hayward here to see you," she said quietly. A pause. "Okay." She hung up and looked at me apologetically. "She's in a meeting. She'll be out in a few minutes." I nodded and sat down in one of the chairs by the window. I watched the guys unload the truck. They worked efficiently, moving boxes and crates with practiced ease. It was good to see. The business was still running, still functional. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. After 10 minutes, Melissa came out of the hallway. She was wearing a tailored suit, charcoal gray, and her hair was pulled back. She looked professional, polished. Nothing like the girl who used to help me organize invoices in the back office. "Dad," she said, "what are you doing here?" "I wanted to see the place." She glanced at the receptionist, then back at me. "You should have called." "I did. You didn't answer." Her jaw tightened. "Let's talk in my office." I followed her down the hall. She opened the door to what used to be my office, and I stopped in the doorway. It was different. The old desk was gone, replaced with something modern and glass-topped. The filing cabinets were gone. The walls had been repainted, a soft gray instead of the beige I'd chosen. Even the smell was different. Lavender, maybe. Some kind of air freshener. "You redecorated," I said. "I updated," Melissa said. She closed the door behind me and gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit." I sat. She moved around the desk and folded her hands, the same gesture I'd seen too many times in the last 48 hours. "What do you want, Dad?" "I want to know what you're doing with my company." "Our company," she corrected. "And I'm running it. That's what you asked me to do." "I asked you to manage operations, not to gut the assets and move them into shell companies." Her expression didn't change. "I don't know what you think you found, but I can assure you everything I've done is legal and in the best interest of the business." "TRG Holdings," I said. "Apex Strategic Partners. What are they?" Restructuring entities. Blake set them up to optimize our tax position and protect the company's assets from liability exposure. Liability exposure from what? From lawsuits, from creditors, from any number of risks that could sink this business if we're not careful. I leaned forward. You're stripping the company and hiding the pieces. Melissa's eyes hardened. I'm protecting what you built. You're just too stubborn to see it. Then show me. Walk me through the structure. Explain where the money went. She stood up. I don't have time for this. You signed the transfer, Dad. You gave me control. If you didn't trust me to do the job, you shouldn't have signed. I trusted you, I said. That was my mistake. Her face went pale. For a moment, I thought she might actually tell me the truth. But then her expression smoothed over, and she walked to the door. You need to leave. I stood up slowly. I'm calling a shareholder meeting, I said. 10 days. I'm voting to remove you as CEO and dissolve the delegation agreement. She laughed. It was a short, bitter sound. Good luck with that. I don't need luck. I have 60%. You have 60% of nothing, she said. The business doesn't exist the way you think it does anymore. The assets are protected. The liabilities are isolated. If you try to undo what I've built, you'll destroy everything. Then I'll destroy it. She stared at me for a long moment. Get out, she said. I walked past her and out into the hallway. The receptionist wouldn't look at me. I kept walking, through the lobby, out into the parking lot, into my truck. My hands were shaking. That night, Anne and I sat at the kitchen table. I told her what Melissa had said, and she listened with the same calm focus she always had. She's bluffing, Anne said. Maybe. No, she is. If the business was really untouchable, she wouldn't be this defensive. She's scared you'll figure out how to undo it. Paul said I can call a shareholder meeting. Then do it. I looked at her. What if she's right? What if I destroy everything trying to get it back? Anne reached across the table and took my hand. Then you destroy it, she said, but you don't let her take it. The next morning, Paul Brennan emailed me a draft notice for the shareholder meeting. I read it over, signed it, and sent it back. I'll file this with the corporate records and send a copy to Melissa, Paul said when I called him. She has 10 days to prepare. After that, you vote. What if she doesn't show up? Doesn't matter. As long as you have a quorum, the vote is valid. And since you're the majority shareholder, you are the quorum. I thanked him and hung up. Then I started making calls. I called Danny Ruiz, the guy I'd seen at the warehouse. I called 3 other employees who'd been with me for over a decade. I called 2 of my oldest clients. I didn't tell them what was happening. I just asked them questions. How was business? How were things running? Had they noticed any changes? The answers were all the same. Things were fine, professional, efficient, but colder. One of the clients, a guy named Ed Kowalski, who ran a construction firm, said something that stuck with me. Your daughter's smart, Jack. Real smart. But she doesn't care about the work the way you did. It's just numbers to her. I thanked him and hung up. Numbers. That's all it had ever been to Melissa. Not the people, not the relationships. Just numbers on a spreadsheet. On the 5th day, Blake showed up at my house. I was in the garage, organizing tools I didn't need to organize, when I heard the car pull into the driveway. I looked out and saw his black Audi. He got out, straightened his jacket, and walked to the front door. Anne answered. I heard their voices, low and polite, and then Anne called my name. I walked inside. Blake was standing in the entryway, hands in his pockets, looking around like he was appraising the place. Jack, he said, we need to talk. I don't think we do. This shareholder meeting you're planning, it's a mistake. I crossed my arms. That's not your decision. It affects my wife. That makes it my decision. Anne stood in the doorway to the kitchen, watching. Blake glanced at her, then back at me. Look, I get it. You're upset. You feel like you've been cut out. But that's not what's happening here. Melissa is trying to modernize the business. She's trying to take it to the next level, and you're standing in the way. By asking questions, by refusing to trust her. I stepped closer. She forged my signature. She moved money into accounts I don't control. She changed the entire structure of the company without telling me. And you want me to trust her? Blake's expression didn't change. She didn't forge anything. She has signing authority. Everything she's done is legal. Legal isn't the same as right. In business, it is. I felt the anger rise again, cold and steady. Get out of my house. Blake smiled. It was a thin, condescending smile. You're making this harder than it needs to be, Jack. If you go through with this meeting, you're going to regret it. Melissa has options, legal options. She can tie this up in court for years. By the time you get control back, if you get it back, there won't be anything left. Then there won't be anything left. Blake's smile faded. You're a stubborn old man, he said, and that's going to cost you everything. He turned and walked out. I heard the Audi start, heard the tires crunch on the gravel, and then he was gone. Anne came up beside me. He's dangerous, she said quietly. I know. I mean it, Jack. He's not like Melissa. She's arrogant. He's calculating. I looked at her. What do you think I should do? I think you should be ready for him to do something stupid. On the 7th day, I got a letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. It was addressed to me, marked urgent, and delivered by courier. I opened it at the kitchen table. Anne sat across from me watching. The letter was from Blake's attorney. It was formal, dense with legal language, but the message was clear. If I proceeded with the shareholder meeting, Melissa would file a motion to freeze all company assets pending a judicial review of my mental competency. I read it twice. Mental competency, I said. Anne took the letter and skimmed it. They're saying you're not capable of making sound business decisions, that the transfer was a recognition of cognitive decline, and that attempting to reverse it is evidence of impaired judgment. I felt something sharp twist in my chest. That's insane. That's strategy, Anne said. She set the letter down. They're trying to scare you. It's working. She reached across the table and gripped my hand. Jack, listen to me. This is a bluff. If they had any real grounds for a competency hearing, they'd have filed it already. They're hoping you'll back down. And if I don't, then they'll have to prove it. And they can't. I stared at the letter. I don't know if I can fight this. Anne's grip tightened. Yes, you can. On the 9th day, I called Paul Brennan and told him about the letter. It's harassment, he said. Pure intimidation. Ignore it. They're threatening a competency hearing. Let them. They won't win. You're lucid, you're functional, and you have a legitimate reason for calling the meeting. Any judge would see that. What if they don't? Paul sighed. Jack, I've known you for 20 years. You're one of the sharpest people I've ever met. If they want to argue otherwise, they're going to have to bring a lot more than a threatening letter. I thanked him and hung up. Then I sat in my office and thought about the last 2 months. The transfer, the signatures, the holding companies, the restructuring. All of it had been planned. Carefully. Methodically. Melissa and Blake had been working on this for a long time. Maybe longer than I realized. And I'd handed it to them. On the 10th day, I drove to the warehouse for the shareholder meeting. It was scheduled for 10 in the morning. Paul had arranged for a neutral mediator to oversee the vote, just to keep everything formal. I arrived 15 minutes early and parked in the same spot I'd used for 30 years. The lot was empty. I walked inside. The receptionist's desk was vacant. The hallway was quiet. I found Paul waiting in the conference room. He looked up when I came in. Where is everyone? I asked. No one else is coming, he said. Melissa sent a notice this morning. She's invoking a clause in the bylaws that allows her to postpone any shareholder meeting if there's pending litigation. What litigation? Paul handed me a sheet of paper. It was a filing. Civil suit. Melissa Hayward vs. Jack Hayward. The claim, breach of fiduciary duty. I read it twice, but the words didn't make sense. She's suing me? I said. She's saying that by attempting to remove her as CEO, you're acting against the company's best interests. It's a preemptive strike. As long as the suit is active, she can delay the meeting indefinitely. I sat down hard in one of the chairs. Can she do that? Technically, yes. The bylaws are vague enough that she can argue the delay is justified. We can challenge it, but it'll take time. How much time? Months. Maybe a year. I looked at him. She's going to drain the company dry before I ever get a vote. Paul didn't argue. I drove home in a fog. The sun was too bright again, and the road felt unfamiliar, like I'd taken a wrong turn somewhere and ended up in a place I didn't recognize. Anne was waiting when I got home. What happened? She asked. I told her. She listened, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long time. She outplayed you, Anne said finally. I know. So what are you going to do? I looked at her. I don't know. Anne stood up and walked to the window. She stared out at the yard, her arms crossed. You know what I think? She said. What? I think you've been playing by rules that don't exist anymore. What do you mean? She turned around. Melissa and Blake aren't fighting fair. They're using the system, manipulating it, hiding behind lawyers and paperwork and shell companies, and you're still trying to do the right thing. What else am I supposed to do? Anne's eyes were hard. Stop being nice. That night, Melissa called me. You're destroying everything, she said. Her voice was shaking, angry, desperate. I'm protecting what's mine. It's not yours anymore. You gave it to me. And you betrayed me. She was quiet for a long time. I hate you, she said finally. Then she hung up. And the investigation took 3 months. A forensic accountant traced every transaction, every transfer, every shell company. He found exactly what I knew he'd find. Melissa and Blake had systematically looted Hayward Equipment Services. They'd moved assets into offshore accounts, sold equipment to dummy corporations, planned to liquidate the business and walk away with millions. The accountant's report was damning. Paul filed a motion to dissolve the transfer and restore my control. The judge granted it. On a cold morning in March, I walked into the warehouse for the first time in 6 months. The place was different, quieter. Most of the equipment was gone, sold off during the freeze. The crew had been laid off. The lot was empty, but it was mine again. I stood in the middle of the floor and looked around. It wasn't the same. It would never be the same. But it was a start. Melissa and Blake disappeared. Their lawyers said they'd relocated, somewhere overseas, somewhere the courts couldn't touch them. I didn't care. They'd taken money, taken assets, but they hadn't taken everything. I still had my name, and I still had the will to rebuild. Confrontation. 3 months after the judge restored my control, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Dad. It was Melissa. I hadn't heard her voice since the night she'd told me she hated me. The sound of it now, quiet and uncertain, made my chest tighten. What do you want? I said. I'm back in town. I need to talk to you. We don't have anything to talk about. Please, just 20 minutes. I'll meet you anywhere. I should have hung up, should have blocked the number and moved on. But I didn't. The diner on Route 6, I said. Tomorrow, noon. Thank you. She hung up before I could change my mind. I told Anne that night. You're not actually going, are you? She said. I don't know. Jack, she's going to try to manipulate you. That's what she does. Maybe. There's no maybe. She stole from you. She lied to you. She tried to destroy you. And now she wants to talk? She's up to something. Anne was probably right. She usually was. But I had to know. The next day, I drove to the diner. It was a small place, the kind with vinyl booths and a laminated menu that hadn't changed in 20 years. I got there early and ordered coffee. Melissa arrived 10 minutes late. She looked different, thinner, tired. Her hair was pulled back and she wasn't wearing makeup. She slid into the booth across from me and folded her hands on the table. "Thanks for coming," she said. I didn't say anything. "I know you hate me," she said. "I know you have every right to. What I did was wrong. I see that now." "Do you?" She looked down at her hands. "Blake and I split up 2 months ago. He's gone, took everything we had left and disappeared. I don't even know where he is." I sipped my coffee. "And you want sympathy?" "No, I want to apologize." I set the cup down. "You're 6 months too late." "I know." She looked up at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. "I was so stupid, Dad. I thought I knew better. I thought I could build something bigger, something that mattered, but all I did was destroy what you spent your whole life creating, and I lost you in the process." Her voice cracked. I wanted to believe her. Part of me, the part that remembered her as a little girl, wanted to reach across the table and tell her it was okay. But the rest of me remembered the spreadsheet, the offshore accounts, the word dissolution. "Why are you really here?" I said. Melissa wiped her eyes. "Because I need help." There it was. "What kind of help?" "Blake cleaned out our accounts before he left. I don't have anything. No money, no job. I'm staying with a friend, but I can't keep doing that. I need a place to stay, just for a few weeks, until I can figure things out." I stared at her. "You want to move back home?" "Just temporarily. I know it's a lot to ask, but I don't have anyone else." I leaned back in the booth. "You have some nerve." "I know. You stole from me. You tried to ruin me, and now you want me to take care of you?" Melissa's face crumpled. "I don't have anyone else," she said again, quieter this time. I stood up. "Good." I left her sitting there and walked out of the diner. Anne was in the kitchen when I got home. "How did it go?" she asked. "She wants to move back in." Anne's eyes widened. "You said no." "Of course I said no." "Good." I sat down at the table. "She said Blake left her. Took everything." Anne crossed her arms. "She's lying." "Maybe." "No, Jack. She's definitely lying. This is another game. She's trying to get back into your life so she can figure out another angle." I rubbed my face. What if she's telling the truth? Then she deserves everything that's happening to her. Anne sat down across from me. "You can't save her. Not this time. She made her choices. Now she has to live with them." I knew she was right, but it didn't make it any easier. Melissa called me 3 more times over the next week. I didn't answer. Then she showed up at the house. I was in the garage when I heard the car pull into the driveway. I looked out and saw her sitting in an old sedan I didn't recognize. She got out and walked to the door. I met her before she could knock. "You need to leave," I said. "Dad, please, just listen." "No. I'm not here to ask for money. I just need a place to stay, that's all." I said no. She stepped closer. "I'm your daughter. You stopped being my daughter the day you forged my signature." Her face hardened. "Fine, I get it. You hate me. But what about Mom? Does she hate me too?" Anne appeared in the doorway behind me. "Yes," she said. Melissa stared at her. "Mom." "You don't get to call me that," Anne said. "Not after what you did." Melissa's eyes filled with tears. "I made mistakes. I know that. But I'm trying to make it right." "By asking us to take care of you?" Anne said. "That's not making it right. That's asking us to clean up your mess. Again. Melissa looked at me, then back at Anne. I don't have anywhere else to go. That's not our problem, Anne said. She closed the door. I didn't see Melissa again for 2 weeks, but I heard about her. Danny called me and said she'd been at the warehouse, asking for her old job back. I told him to turn her away. Ed Kowalski called and said she'd tried to solicit work from his construction company, claiming she still had connections at Hayward Equipment. I told Ed to block her number. She was desperate. That much was clear. But I didn't care. And then I got a call from Paul. Jack, we have a problem. What kind of problem? Melissa filed a wrongful termination suit. She's claiming you fired her without cause and damaged her reputation. I sat down. She wasn't fired. She was removed by shareholder vote. I know, but she's arguing that the vote was retaliatory, that you used your majority stake to punish her for the restructuring. That's insane. Maybe, but she has a lawyer, and they're asking for damages. How much? $2 million. I closed my eyes. She's trying to bleed me dry. That's exactly what she's doing. She knows you don't have the cash to fight another lawsuit. She's betting you'll settle. I'm not settling. Then we go to court. Again. The lawsuit dragged on for months. Melissa's lawyer was aggressive, filing motion after motion, demanding documents, depositions, financial records. It was exhausting and expensive. Paul's fees were piling up. The forensic accountant's fees were piling up. I was burning through what little cash I'd managed to recover from the business. Anne and I had to take out a loan just to keep up. She's going to win, Anne said one night. No, she's not. Jack, look at the numbers. We can't afford to keep fighting. I looked at the stack of bills on the table. I don't have a choice. The trial was set for June. In the meantime, I kept working, rebuilding the business, reaching out to old clients, hiring back employees. It was slow, painful, but it was progress. One afternoon, I was at the warehouse when Danny came into the office. Jack, there's someone here to see you. Who? She didn't say, but she looks official. I walked out to the lobby and found a woman in a dark suit standing by the desk. She was holding a briefcase. Mr. Hayward? She said. That's me. She handed me a business card. My name is Rachel Ortiz. I'm an investigator with the State Attorney General's office. I looked at the card. What's this about? We've received a complaint regarding financial irregularities at your company, specifically allegations of fraud and embezzlement. My stomach dropped. From who? I'm not at liberty to say, but I'd like to ask you a few questions. The interview lasted 2 hours. Rachel asked me about the restructuring, the transfers, the offshore accounts. She asked about Melissa and Blake. She asked about the lawsuit. I answered everything honestly. When she was done, she closed her notebook and stood up. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Hayward. Am I being investigated? She hesitated. The investigation is ongoing. I can't comment on specific targets, but I'd advise you to retain counsel. I already have a lawyer. Good. You're going to need one. She left. I called Paul immediately. They're investigating me for fraud, I said. Who's they? The State Attorney General's office. Someone filed a complaint. Paul was quiet for a moment. It was Melissa. How do you know? Because this is exactly the kind of thing she'd do. She can't win the lawsuit, so she's trying to tie you up with a criminal investigation. It's a stalling tactic. Can they actually charge me? Depends on what they find, but based on what we know, you didn't do anything wrong. The fraud was on Melissa's side, not yours. Then why are they investigating me? Because someone made a very convincing accusation, and now they have to follow up. And the investigation dragged on for another 3 months. Rachel Ortiz interviewed employees, reviewed documents, analyzed financial records. She was thorough, professional, and she didn't give anything away. I didn't know if I was the target or if Melissa was. I didn't know if they'd find anything. All I knew was that my life was collapsing. In September, Rachel called me. "Mr. Hayward, I need you to come to my office." "What for?" "I have some information to share with you." I drove downtown and met her in a small conference room. She had a file in front of her. She opened it and slid a document across the table. "We've completed our investigation," she said, "and we've determined that the complaint against you was fabricated." I stared at the document. "What?" "The allegations were false. There's no evidence of fraud or embezzlement on your part. In fact, our investigation found that the fraud was committed by your daughter and her husband." I felt something loosen in my chest. "So I'm clear?" "Yes, but there's more." She pulled out another document. "We've issued a warrant for Melissa Hayward's arrest. We believe she's still in the state. If you hear from her, I need you to contact me immediately." I nodded. "What about Blake?" "He's out of the country. We've issued an international warrant, but it's unlikely he'll return voluntarily." Rachel stood up. "I'm sorry for what you've been through, Mr. Hayward, but I want you to know that justice will be served." I left the building and sat in my truck. For the first time in a year, I felt like I could breathe. The investigation was over. Melissa was going to be arrested. It was over. But it wasn't, because 2 days later, Melissa showed up at my house again. But it was late, past 10. Anne had already gone to bed. I was sitting in the living room when I heard the knock. I opened the door and found Melissa standing on the porch. She looked terrible. Her eyes were red, her hair was tangled, and she was shaking. "They're coming for me," she said. "I know. You called them." "No, but I didn't stop them either." She stepped forward. "Dad, please. You have to help me." "No, I don't. I'm your daughter." "Not anymore." Her face twisted. "How can you say that? After everything we've been through." "After everything you've put me through," I said. "You stole from me, you lied to me, you tried to destroy me, and now you want me to protect you?" "I made mistakes. You committed crimes." Melissa started crying. "Please, I can't go to jail. I'll do anything, just help me." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I closed the door. The police came an hour later. I watched from the window as they pulled into the driveway. Melissa was sitting on the porch steps, her head in her hands. They walked up, spoke to her briefly, and put her in handcuffs. She didn't resist. As they led her to the car, she looked up at the house. Our eyes met. And then, she was gone. Resolution. The trial started in November. I wasn't required to attend, but I went anyway. Paul thought it was a bad idea, said it might make me look vindictive, but I didn't care. I wanted to see it through. The courtroom was small, sterile, with fluorescent lights that made everything look washed out. Melissa sat at the defense table with her lawyer, a young guy who looked like he'd just passed the bar. She was wearing a gray suit, her hair pulled back, her expression blank. She didn't look at me. The prosecution laid out their case over 3 days. They presented the emails I'd found, the spreadsheets, the bank records. They called witnesses. Danny testified about the conversations he'd overheard. Ed Kowalski testified about the billing changes. The forensic accountant walked the jury through every transaction, every shell company, every fraudulent transfer. It was methodical, devastating. Melissa's lawyer tried to argue that she'd been acting on Blake's advice, that she hadn't understood the legal implications of what she was doing. He painted her as a victim, manipulated by her husband, pressured into decisions she didn't fully comprehend. It didn't work. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. Anne didn't come to the sentencing hearing. "I can't watch it," she said the night before. "I can't sit there and see her like that." I understood. I went alone. The courtroom was even emptier this time. Just me, the lawyers, and a few reporters who'd been following the case. Melissa was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. She sat down at the defense table and stared straight ahead. The judge read the charges and the verdict, then asked if Melissa had anything to say. Her lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client deeply regrets her actions. She's lost everything, her marriage, her family, her reputation. She's already suffered more than any sentence could impose. We ask the court for leniency." The judge looked at Melissa. "Ms. Hayward, do you have anything to add?" Melissa stood slowly. She turned and looked at me for the first time since the trial began. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was quiet, barely audible. "I'm sorry for what I did. I know it doesn't change anything. But I need you to know that I'm sorry." I didn't move. The judge made a note, then looked at the prosecution. "Does the state have a recommendation?" The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, the defendant engaged in a deliberate, calculated scheme to defraud her father and destroy his business. She showed no remorse until she was caught. The state recommends the maximum sentence." The judge nodded. "Ms. Hayward, I've reviewed the evidence in this case, and I find your actions to be particularly egregious. You exploited your father's trust, violated your fiduciary duty, and caused significant financial and emotional harm. While I take into account your lack of prior criminal history, I cannot overlook the severity of your conduct." She paused. "I hereby sentence you to 8 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 5. In addition, you are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $2.3 million. The gavel came down. Melissa's knees buckled. Her lawyer grabbed her arm to steady her. I stood up and walked out. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel vindication. I just felt tired. I drove home and found Anne sitting at the kitchen table. "How did it go?" she asked. 8 years. Anne closed her eyes. "Good." I sat down across from her. She apologized. "Do you believe her?" "I don't know." Anne reached across the table and took my hand. "It doesn't matter. It's over now." But it wasn't over. Not completely. Because 2 days after the sentencing, I got a call from Rachel Ortiz. "Mr. Hayward, we need to talk." "About what?" "Blake. We found him." Blake had been living in Costa Rica under a fake name. He'd been arrested at the request of U.S. authorities and was being extradited. "We'll need you to testify," Rachel said, "at his trial." "When?" "We're hoping to fast-track it. Maybe 6 months." I thanked her and hung up. 6 more months. Blake's trial was in May. It was longer than Melissa's, more complicated. Blake's lawyers were better, more experienced, and they fought every piece of evidence the prosecution presented. But the evidence was overwhelming. The emails, the offshore accounts, the recorded conversation, all of it pointed to Blake as the architect of the scheme. I testified on the 3rd day. The prosecutor asked me to describe the transfer, the restructuring, the moment I realized what was happening. I answered every question, keeping my voice steady, my tone factual. Then Blake's lawyer cross-examined me. "Mr. Hayward, you signed the delegation agreement, correct?" "Yes." "And you were represented by counsel?" "Yes." "And at no point did you object to the terms of the agreement?" "I trusted my daughter." "But you didn't trust her enough to let her run the business without interference." "I didn't interfere. I asked questions." "And when you didn't like the answers, you filed a lawsuit. When I discovered fraud, I took action." Blake's lawyer smiled. No further questions. The jury convicted Blake on all counts. He was sentenced to 12 years, no possibility of parole. I thought that would be the end. But there was one more thing. In the restitution, Melissa had been ordered to pay back $2.3 million. Blake had been ordered to pay $3 million. The problem was, neither of them had any money. Blake had hidden assets overseas, but the government was still tracking them down. Melissa had nothing. Paul told me I could file a civil claim against both of them, try to recover what I'd lost, but it would take years. And even if I won, there was no guarantee I'd see a dime. You could spend the rest of your life chasing money that doesn't exist, Paul said. I thought about it for a long time. Then I told him to drop it. I'm done, I said. Ann and I sold the house in June. It was too big, too full of memories. We bought a smaller place outside town, closer to the lake. I kept the business, scaled it down, focused on a few key clients, hired a small crew. It wasn't what it used to be, but it was enough. Danny stayed on, so did a few others. We rebuilt, slowly. One afternoon, I was at the warehouse when I got a letter. It was from Melissa. I almost threw it away without reading it, but I didn't. I opened it. The letter was short. Dad, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I destroyed everything we had, but I need you to know that I think about you every day. I think about what I did, and I'm ashamed. I don't expect you to write back. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I'll always be sorry. Melissa. I read it twice. Then I folded it up and put it in my desk drawer. I didn't write back. A year later, I got another letter. This one was from Blake. I didn't open it. I burned it. Ann and I were sitting on the porch one evening, watching the sunset over the lake, when she asked me a question. Do you regret it? Regret what? Giving her the business, trusting her. I thought about it. No, I said. I regret what she did with it, but I don't regret trying. Ann nodded. Good. We sat in silence for a while. Then she said, Do you think you'll ever forgive her? I looked out at the water. I don't know. That's okay. I never saw Melissa again. She served her time, got out early on good behavior. I heard she moved to another state, started over under a different name. I didn't look for her. I didn't want to know. The business kept running, not like it used to, but enough. I hired a young guy named Trevor to help with operations. He was smart, hardworking, reminded me of myself when I was his age. I started teaching him the trade, showing him how things worked, how to build relationships with clients, how to solve problems. He asked me once if I'd ever thought about expanding again. I told him no. Why not? He asked. Because I learned my lesson. He didn't push. Ann and I celebrated our 40th anniversary in August. We went to the coast, stayed in a little bed and breakfast, walked on the beach. It was quiet, peaceful. One night, we were sitting on the deck watching the waves, and Ann said something that stuck with me. You know what I think? What? I think you won. I looked at her. How do you figure? You got your business back. You rebuilt. You're still here. Melissa's in prison. Blake's in prison. They lost everything. I thought about that. It doesn't feel like winning, I said. That's because you're a good person, Ann said. But trust me, you won. I kept working, kept building, kept moving forward. Because that's all you can do. Revelation. In September, I got a call from a lawyer I didn't know. His name was Alan Pressman, and he said he represented an estate that had an interest in Hayward Equipment Services. What kind of interest? I asked. I'd prefer to discuss it in person. Are you available tomorrow? I met him at his office the next day. Pressman was older, maybe 70, with silver hair and a suit that looked expensive. He gestured for me to sit and placed a folder on the desk between us. Mr. Hayward, are you familiar with Pinnacle Industrial Holdings? I felt my chest tighten. Yes, that's the company Blake was funneling assets to. Pressman nodded. Correct. And I'm here to inform you that Pinnacle Industrial Holdings has been dissolved. Its assets have been liquidated and the proceeds are being distributed according to a court order. What does that have to do with me? Pressman opened the folder and slid a document across the desk. You're entitled to a portion of those proceeds, roughly $1.8 million. I stared at him. How? The court determined that the assets held by Pinnacle were fraudulently obtained. As the original owner of those assets, you're entitled to restitution. I picked up the document and scanned it. Blake hid this money offshore. How did they find it? The government has been very persistent. They traced the accounts, froze the assets, and initiated seizure proceedings. It took over a year, but they recovered a significant portion of what was taken. I set the document down. 1.8 million. Yes, it's not everything you lost, but it's substantial. I leaned back in my chair. For the first time in 2 years, I felt something close to relief. What do I need to do? Sign here, Pressman said, pointing to a line at the bottom of the page. The funds will be transferred to your account within 30 days. I signed. I didn't tell Anne right away. I wanted to process it first, figure out what it meant. That night, I sat in my office and looked at the bank statements from the business. We were stable, but just barely. The restitution would change that. It would give us breathing room, a chance to rebuild properly. I could hire more people, buy new equipment, maybe even expand, or I could retire. I thought about that for a long time. I told Anne the next morning. She was in the kitchen making coffee when I walked in and set the document on the counter. What's this? She asked. Read it. She picked it up and scanned the page. Her eyes widened. Jack, is this real? Yes. She set the document down and looked at me. What are you going to do with it? I don't know yet. Anne smiled. Yes, you do. I decided to keep working, not because I needed the money, but because I needed the work. The business had always been more than just income for me. It was purpose, identity, a way to measure my life. I used the restitution to pay off the loans Anne and I had taken out. I hired back 2 more employees. I bought a new truck and a hydraulic lift. Things started to feel normal again, or as normal as they could. In October, I got another letter from Melissa. This one was longer. She wrote about prison, about the people she'd met, about the therapy she was doing. She said she'd been thinking a lot about what she'd done, about the choices she'd made, about the person she'd become. I don't expect you to forgive me, she wrote, but I want you to know that I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did, and I'm trying to make sure I never hurt anyone like that again. I read the letter twice. Then I put it in the drawer with the first one. I still didn't write back. Anne asked me about it one night. Are you ever going to respond? I don't know. Do you want to? I thought about it. Part of me does. Part of me wants to tell her that I forgive her, that we can move past this. And the other part? The other part remembers what she did, and knows that some things can't be fixed. Anne nodded. You don't have to decide today. But I did decide. A week later, I sat down and wrote a letter. I didn't forgive her. I didn't tell her that everything was okay. I just told her the truth. Melissa, I got your letters. I've read them both. I'm glad you're trying to change. I hope you succeed, but I can't be part of that process. What you did hurt me in ways I'm still trying to understand. I don't hate you, but I can't have you in my life. I hope you find peace. Dad. I mailed it the next day. I never heard from her again. In December, Trevor asked me if I'd thought about bringing on a partner. What kind of partner? I said. Someone younger. Someone who could take over when you're ready to step back. I looked at him. Are you offering? He smiled. Maybe. I thought about it. Let me think about it. Anne and I talked about it that night. Do you trust him? She asked. I think so. That's not the same as knowing. I know. Anne looked at me. You can't live your life afraid to trust people, Jack. What Melissa did was terrible, but it doesn't mean everyone is going to betray you. She was right, but it didn't make it any easier. I told Trevor, yes. We drew up a partnership agreement. Limited at first. He'd handle day-to-day operations while I focused on client relationships and long-term strategy. It felt right, or as right as anything could. One afternoon in January, I was at the warehouse when Danny came into the office. Jack, there's someone here to see you. Who? She says her name is Emily, says she's Melissa's daughter. I froze. Melissa doesn't have a daughter. That's what she said. I walked out to the lobby. A young woman was standing by the door. She looked to be in her early 20s, with dark hair and familiar eyes. Melissa's eyes. Mr. Hayward? She said. That's me. I'm Emily. I'm Melissa's daughter. I stared at her. I didn't know she had a daughter. Emily looked down. She doesn't talk about me much. I was raised by my dad. He and Melissa split up when I was 3. I didn't know what to say. Why are you here? Emily shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to meet you. Melissa told me about you, about what happened. I wanted to see if the stories were true. What stories? That you were a good man. That she ruined your life. I sat down. She told you that? Emily nodded. She writes to me sometimes, not often, but when she does, she talks about you, about how much she regrets what she did. I looked at this young woman, this stranger who carried my daughter's face, and I didn't know what to feel. What do you want from me? I asked. Emily hesitated. Nothing. I just wanted to meet you, to see if you were real. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I said, Do you want some coffee? Emily and I talked for over an hour. She told me about her life, about growing up without Melissa, about her dad, who'd done his best but struggled, about college where she was studying business. I want to do what Melissa couldn't, she said. I want to build something honest, something that matters. I looked at her.